call to mind your idea of holiness and the most holy being you can imagine. Think of them as clearly as you can and visualize them, or tune into the feeling of it, or think of their qualities. Buddha or Jesus or Lama, whatever. Try to be as clear as you can in your mind and in your heart about that being. Take a moment and thank them for being in your life. Ask them to continue to stay, to guide you, teach you, your mind. Offer them something you value that you're happy to part with and offer to them. It could be real or imagined. Something beautiful, wonderful, beautiful form, object. Recall your greatest goodness of the day and see it very clearly and offer your virtue to them. Take a moment and recall your greatest negativity of the day. Be a thought or something you did or said. See it clearly, remember it clearly. Reflect upon how it's really the opposite of this being and what they stand for and they teach. Try to generate some feeling of regret about doing that. Feel some resolve in your heart that you'll make efforts for the evening or some manageable period of time to restrain yourself from doing it again. And think briefly that this negativity is collectively karma caused to experience the same problem again. What you did will come back to you. It's a similar result. Reflect upon how it was unpleasant and how it will be unpleasant again to experience it more. And focus again on the good qualities, the high holy qualities of this being in your mind, which you're connected to. Yeah, see it very clearly. Try to isolate a specific quality that you admire and aspire to. Ask them to bless you to attain this quickly. To stay with you and to bring you to the end of your spiritual path. Make the heart connection with them that way. They are, of course, happy. And they come close and stay near you. You can visualize them as a glowing figure, small above the crown of your head, facing forward if you wish. You can feel them close in any way you like. Well, homage to all holy beings. Thank you for coming. Nice to be here with you. This is our last class in this course. This is course 16, where we're reviewing 100 and some hours of class material in 2 hours. It'll be overview and condensed, right? We've reviewed Lam Rim, right? We reviewed Buddhist refuge. We reviewed applied meditation, proof of past and future lives, and how karma works, and going into all those things in detail. So tonight is the final review, and if you think about it, you know, all of the quiz questions on the final are derived from the quizzes of each class, right? We've had 10 classes. Each class has a quiz in principle. I'm not sure how many people did the quizzes, but in principle there's a quiz, right? So the quiz contains the most important questions from the homework, right, in this review course. And then the review classes really contain the essence of the original materials, right, from the quizzes from the original materials. And the quizzes from the original materials come from the homeworks of the originals. So this is really the essence of the essence of the essence of the essence of the material, right, distilled down in its most sort of condensed form. So the cream de la cream, as it were, right? So when this final was first put together, it was something like 90 questions, you know, because there's so much material to cover. But you can't really do a final 90 questions in 2 hours. So it's cut down to less than half of that, so it's not so bad. These are the most important things that you really have to know if you're going to be a good teacher. The cream of everything in Buddhism is really there. So, you know, the Lam Rim is the overview of the Buddhist path, right, from beginning to end. The three principal paths. And then, you know, Buddhist refuge is something that obviously everyone should take if they're serious as a Buddhist. And we went into meditation because, you know, you can't just study, you have to meditate, right? Intellectual studies are not enough. You have to internalize it and bring it to a deeper level within yourself via meditation, right? And then we went into the proof of future lives because it's important as a Western culture, American culture, to prove past and future lives early on, because so much of what we talk about is founded upon that. And it's important to establish that early in one's Buddhist careers. So most people, I think most people in the West aren't so sure about karma. And so we do proof of future lives and karma earlier than you would learn them in the monastery, because in this culture and in this environment, it's important to establish those things as a foundation for all the other topics. So we move them up in the curriculum so that they're taught much earlier than you would study them in the monastery, for example. They come much later in your monastic career, because these courses are meant to parallel the monastic education, right? That's the original principle and idea behind these things. Was that Holy Geshe Michael spent around 20 years studying at the monastery, and then distill all of that down into an equivalent Western style education curriculum, covering the core of what you get at a monastery if you're going to get your Geshe degree or your equivalent of a doctor of philosophy or teaching degree or something like that, right? So the foundation of the first 5 courses is really strong in terms of introducing people to Dharma in a culture where people didn't grow up Buddhist, right? So, I mean, basically there's a lot to cover, and I think what we're going to do is just to go through some of the questions on the final, because I can't really condense 110 hours down any more than we have. So we're just going to hit the final questions and the highlights and make sure you got the main concepts. The point of these courses is really to cultivate the next generation of Buddhist teachers in the West, right? Thank you, Jim. You know, we are very fortunate that these teachings were passed on to us in an unbroken lineage from the time of the Buddha 2,500 years ago. And so the whole point here is that we're part of the lineage and we want to continue that lineage. And so when Holy Geshe Michael created the materials, his dream and his vision was that this would be a way to continue the lineage in the West, you know, to take the authentic Buddhist lineage and transmission, which is a living transmission, and to continue it and to perpetuate it, right? And so we're all part of that lineage, which has come down through, like the Bunka Rinpoche and Ken Rinpoche and Geshe Michael. And and to me and to you. And so it's really important to understand that you are an active part of the lineage. You are an active part of this lineage from Shakyamuni Buddha, and so there's a real responsibility associated with it. We don't want to let the lineage die with us, right? I mean, each of us who teaches seriously has a responsibility to keep the teachings alive and to pass them on to other people. And so that's why these courses were created, and that's why they exist, and that's why we're teaching them, right? Is to take people who are really serious about their spiritual studies and their spiritual practice, and to give them a really solid foundation in monastic scriptures and curriculum and everything you would learn at a monastery, in its most essential form, so that you can be a really competent and qualified Buddhist teacher. Right? So please don't think of yourselves as a passive participant. Don't think of yourselves as a passive person who just comes to class and listens a little bit and then goes out and forgets about it. Right? That's not why we're doing this, and that's not the intention behind this. So that said, we'll launch right into it. Question 2 on the file. I'm not going to do all the questions. I probably shouldn't give you the numbers because you could write them in your notes and write the answers, but you won't do that, right? I don't care. You can do it. You can just make notes of the numbers. No. All right. So it's about the relationship between the 3 principal paths in tantric practice. It's kind of a nice way to start, right? So there's this kind of American misconception or Dharma rumor. Geshe Michael likes to call them Dharma rumors, which I really liked when I first started studying, which is that somehow Lam-Rim is for beginners and somehow tantric practice is for advanced people, and it's some kind of advanced thing, and when you get to the advanced stuff you just ignore Lam-Rim or 3 principal paths and you say, I just want to go to initiations and things with high lamas, and I want to this sadhana and that sadhana, and this tantric practice and that tantric practice, and I don't need Lam-Rim, and I don't care about Lam-Rim, right? So I don't have to go to those courses. So there's a saying in Tibetan. It's that I'm not going to go into Tibetan because we don't have time. But it's that you're basically broadcasting your ignorance when you think like that. They call it broadcasting your stupidity in the Tibetan colloquial, because it really demonstrates a fundamental ignorance about the Buddhist path and how the Buddhist path works, especially the more advanced aspects of the Buddhist path. So Lam-Rim is a ticket to Tantra, and you have people for some reason have the misconception that it doesn't work that way. Lam-Rim is the foundation. The 3 principal paths are the foundation of advanced practices and higher practices in Buddhism. And if one is engaging in Lam-Rim and 3 principal paths, then one is collecting the virtue and the causes, which will ripen into profound results and will naturally ripen and automatically ripen into the tantric path. So it's not some kind of disconnected thing or some kind of thing where there's no association or no relationship there. It's a very beautiful thing where the sutra flows into the tantra, and it's not like somehow you say I'm done with one, I'm on to the other. That's really a gross misunderstanding of how it works. So, especially the ethical component and the component of working with one's ethical life and ethical with one's vows. The advanced teachings and tantra are simply a much more highly refined practice of one's ethics and vows and view, along with other things. So, all right. So that's question number 2. Question number 3 are, how do you determine a qualified lama? What makes a qualified lama? What makes a qualified spiritual teacher, right? I mean, you bump into somebody, they got the right costume, they're the right ethnicity, they're from the right country, they got the right accoutrement, seem kind of hip, seem kind of cool, have a good following. How do you know if they're a qualified lama, right? How do you evaluate? How do you tell if they're the real deal or not, right? So important for every beginning student to know, right? And they should know, from the outset, because it's one of the easiest ways to get messed up in the colloquial, I guess you'd say, to run aground, for your ship to run aground, for your spiritual ship to crash upon the rocks, is to have an unqualified spiritual teacher, right? It's very dangerous to listen to someone, to develop a philosophical belief system, to develop a life belief system, and to live your very life according to what someone is saying or advocating if they don't know what they're talking about? Or worse, if what they're talking about is actually damaging to your mind, or spiritually damaging, or karmically damaging, where they're somehow able to pass off crazy ideas or wrong ideas as a spiritual path of practice, and then we're seriously messed up for a long time, not just this lifetime, but potentially multiple lifetimes. So important to know the 10 qualities of a qualified Lama. Right? Okay. So next question is about the 4 principles of karma, right? And so, if you're teaching, it's really important to mention your students. It's really important to mention to your students how, the first law of karma is very similar to, what the Bible teaches and what we grew up with in Christianity. So I get up at 5 o'clock this morning for a board meeting. It's been a long day, so be slightly less coherent than otherwise. So, and then in the Bible and the teachings that we grew up with, they're talking about, as you sow, so shall you reap. You don't get persimmons from lemons or whatever they say in the Bible. I don't know what it is. If you sow lemon seeds, don't expect limes. What the seeds you plant are the results you get, right? I mean, karma is like that. It's first law of karma, right? Like produces like, right? You can't get bad results from good deeds. If you're being virtuous and engaging in goodness, it's impossible that would bring a bad result. And vice versa. If you're engaging in negativity and harmful activities, it's impossible that would produce a good result, right? First law of karma, right? So, although it seems to be that way in normal life, right? And I think in the West, people have heard of karma, certainly. They think, if you step on a bug and, squash a bug, you'll come back as a bug and somebody will squash you, and, that's karma, right? But this is a fairly crude understanding, right? So, our job as teachers is to prove the first law of karma, and through various proofs and reasonings, to prove that like produces like, right? And that it's impossible for a virtue to produce a suffering result. Yeah? And then sooner or later it pays off. And then the second law of karma is that consequences are greater than their actions, right? You plant a seed, it gestates, it grows, it flowers, it brings a result. And karmic seed is very similar to physical seeds. That's why it's used as an analogy or a metaphor. I mean, the United States started as an idea a couple hundred years ago in people's minds, and now it's a multi-trillion-dollar thing affecting the entire planet. So everything really is that way. Everything starts small and grows, right? So consequences are greater than their actions. So it's important to teach that to Westerners, because I think typically they think that small bad deeds are okay. White lies are okay, right? If I take something that doesn't belong to me from work, it's a small thing, it's okay, right? Small bad deeds, no problem. So, even the idea of, jostling someone walking down the street, or feeling slightly irritated, having the sense of irritation in your mind when someone bumps into you in the store, or whatever it might be, that moment of irritation in one's mind is the collection of karma, and those seeds are planted. The act of perceiving it plants the karmic seeds, and those impulses, those seeds will gestate and grow and become stronger, and irritation will grow and become greater. Right? So you have to be aware that doing small bad deeds is actually meaningful and important to pay attention to, because if we don't teach that, then people will go through their lives thinking little bad deeds are okay, and they'll have years of problems and not understand why they have this constant, sort of background problem or ongoing ongoing problems in their lives, because they're constantly collecting causes to suffer in that way, right? So, the third law, important to stress the second law of people, so that this idea of, a little negativity is okay, doesn't go on. A little negativity is better than a lot of negativity, right? But it's still not okay. So, our goal is to eliminate negativity in our minds, right, and in our world. And it's not possible to evolve to to a state free of all mental afflictions and free of all suffering if we're just like, oh, well, paradise will have a little bit of problem, you know? It doesn't work that way, right? So, you know, if we're going to move from here to there, then we have to root the negativity out of our minds and the afflictions out of our minds, such that we're free of it, right? And so, you know, that idea of being somewhat tolerant to the negativities is doesn't work. It's impossible, you know, to attain enlightenment with some kind of attitude that I can misbehave to some degree. You know, some negativity is fine in the end, right? It doesn't work, it doesn't fly. Okay. Law number 3 is great. If you don't do something, you don't get the result. I mean, you meet all kinds of people who are like, why aren't I getting spiritual results? Like, how come I'm not getting realizations? Because you didn't do anything. Because you didn't collect any causes. It's like we live in a culture where it's like, well, I just want it to happen to me because I want it to happen to me, right? I just want it. Can I please have it? I want it. Like, why aren't I getting the things I want? I want them. Isn't it enough? No. Doesn't work that way, right? Everything is caused. Nothing happens unless you cause it. And so the same is true of our spiritual lives, right? I mean, it's we can sit there and think like, I'm a good person and I should have everything I want all day long. But isn't going to necessarily happen, right? So, you know, everything is caused. So, you know, all the complaining and all the kvetching and all the wishing isn't going to make a difference if we don't do the good deeds. You know, then we don't collect the causes, there's no noticeable results, and life continues as it has been, right? So, and then the 4th law is once you commit an action, then the consequence can't be lost, right? You do something, must get a result, right? So, same corollary, you know? If you do a virtue, you must get a good result. If you engage in negativity, you must have a suffering result, okay? So, and you have to say, when you're teaching that karma doesn't just go away, if you do something, you get a result, you have to qualify it, right? Because there's this thing called karmic purification, right? Which is that we can damage the karmic seeds, the negative karmic seeds we collected. Analogous to if you have a seed, you plant it in the ground, you never water it, never sees any sunshine, never has any nutrients, it's a damaged seed. It's never going to really become much, right? So it's similarly, karmically, same principle. You know, if you collect a negative karmic seed and then you engage in karmic purification, which is really destroying that seed, actively attacking and destroying that seed, you know, like pouring acid on a seed or something so it never brings a result, then you won't get or much of a result to speak of, right? So important to teach the 4 powers, okay? So first you have to teach that things that once you collect a cause, the result must come. And then it's kind of cruel to then not sort of teach that when you collect negative seeds, that you can do something about it. Because that is hopeless, right? Because if we look at our minds and how our mind is functioning all day long, it can be mostly negativity. It can be a lot of negative stuff going on in our mind all day long, right? Countless negative karmic seeds we're collecting. And if we're not able to counteract that, right, and do something about all those karmic seeds, then you know, the odds are significantly against us, right? So you got to teach them how to get out of and how to remove the negative karma we've collected, and how to get out of suffering the consequences of the negative karma we've collected, right? All right. So then number 7, can the idea of karma and ethics, the idea of ethics or morality, coexist? Or are they mutually exclusive? Right? Do they contradict each other? So, I mean, it was common even in ancient Tibet for people who weren't really trained in Buddhism to say, well, because things are empty, nothing matters, right? If everything's empty, then anything can be anything, and, you know, I can do this or I can do that, and it's empty, so that's okay. You know, so this sort of very, cursory exposure to the idea of emptiness, right? It's very sort of, poorly understood grasp of emptiness can easily lead a person to think, to just look at the world in the wrong way, and to think emptiness means nothing matters, when it's exactly the opposite of what it means. You know, emptiness means everything matters. Emptiness means everything has the potential to be experienced in any way, right? I mean, everything is a basis, right, of any valid perception, of any valid experience. So people who think nothing matters are really in dangerous territory of ignorance. it's like the world is a big blank screen, if you will, and we're constantly projecting our inner landscape onto it. We have this inner landscape of our own, which is our mind and the content of our mind, and as expressed by our karmic seeds as they flower and ripen and assert themselves, right? And so, as we go through our day and as we go through our life, we're constantly projecting concepts and ideas and identity and value and emotion and experience onto everything around us. So we're the projector projecting onto a blank screen around us continuously. I mean, I like to say, like, think about it, you go to a movie, right? You go to the movie theater for an hour and a half and you watch a really engrossing movie, and they do it well, and you're sitting there and you really feel like you're part of the experience. You're sitting in front of the screen and it's 40 feet wide and 20 feet tall, whatever it is. And you're sitting there and you're watching it and you're listening, and it's like, yeah, I'm there with these people. I mean, you're not consciously thinking it, but that's the net effect, right? You're like immersed in it, and you're having that experience as a valid perception, a valid experience. I'm crying, I'm upset, I'm afraid, whatever. And that's only engaging two senses, right? I mean, you're watching a movie on it is literally a white blank screen, a flat white blank screen, right? And we're watching a flat two-dimensional thing being projected onto it, and we're experiencing it as valid reality for that period of time because our mind is immersed in it, right? Or it's however you want to express that. And then the world is the same way, except that we're engaging five senses. So imagine yourself being in a movie, with a 3D screen, where you're not just engaging two senses, but you're engaging five senses. You've got smell, and taste, and touch, as well as sight and sound. And so, that is the nature of reality. This is all a blank screen, which we're constantly projecting onto, as a multi-sensory experience, a five-sense experience, right? So that is the nature of emptiness. Every object is shaped in colors. Every object is a basis of projection of label and term and name and experience and emotion and thought, right? So what we experience, whether it's visually or through any sense, depends upon our past karma and what karmic seeds are flowering, how our mind is functioning, right, and how we're perceiving, right? Creation of past karma. So emptiness, the fact that this is all a blank screen, gives karma a place to project, right? So we have in our mind we have all of these ripenings, projections, and perceptions going on continuously, and that's the expression of karma. Karma is the beings in other realms don't even necessarily have five senses. You see, some realms, according to Buddhism, beings in other realms might only have three senses and not five senses. And so, why? Because it's the nature of their mind and how their mind is functioning. They don't perceive with the same senses we perceive. They're projecting with their mind, with a certain set of senses, onto a blank screen, and that is their world and that is their reality. And just as we're doing it with five senses here, in our world, in our realm. Okay, so like that. So, the events of our lives are caused by the karmic projections, which are forced upon us. We've collected all these karmic seeds. They're ripening out of control. We're not controlling the ripening of trillions upon trillions of karmic seeds, every day. And that's driving our life and driving our reality and driving our perception and driving our thoughts. As we've said many times, I don't choose to have the thoughts I have. I mean, we think we do, but if we're paying attention, it's not like I chose to be happy for the last 30 seconds, and so I was. It's not like I chose to be depressed for the last 2 days, and so I was. It doesn't work that way, right? There is not a conscious process whereby we are picking the thoughts that are in our head, right? It's the ripening karma, yeah.
Wait, but then there is a point when you can manipulate the karmas to change your experience, right?
What is that?
Does that begin in nirvana? No, because you lose, karma goes away in nirvana, right?
You tell me, we've done.
I'm telling you that karma goes away. But what's the
well, first of all, what does it mean karma goes away? Because what is karma?
You're not subject
hold on. Let me ask you, what is the definition of karma?
Movement of the mind.
Movement of the mind and what follows. Does karma go away? Well, because that would mean the movement of your mind goes away, right?
But then the storehouse of seeds, I guess, is diminished? Or
Karmic seeds flowering and ripening are your perceptions. So if you are perceiving, you're having karmic seeds ripening.
so then when you're in nirvana, it's just good seeds?
Yeah, exactly. So what is nirvana? I ask you, having gone through 110 hours of classes or so, what is nirvana? Please.
The cessation of all mental afflictions.
Mr. Word. Permanent.
Permanent cessation.
Permanent cessation of all mental afflictions. What does that mean? It means you have no more negative seeds in your karmic pocket that can ever ripen into an unpleasant mental event or perception or experience. So nirvana is a state of only having positive, virtuous karmic seeds in your mind stream, right? So you can only experience the flowering of positive mental state, right? And you can never experience a negative or afflicted or disturbed mental state.
But isn't there a time where you have a little bit more control over?
Yeah, like in your spiritual evolution, right? So I think the question is in your spiritual evolution, do you reach a point? I mean, we are here. Wherever here is for each of us. I can't read anyone's mind, so I don't know. Probably all holy beings here humoring me. So,
No, I'm not
thank you.
humoring you.
You humor me all the time, Hector. So, you know, I'm glad you asked, and everyone should jump in and ask. And just be patient at the end of class if we have a little more to cover. So I'm cool if you're cool. So it's a really important question because, you know, we're going from here to there. There is nirvana and enlightenment. As we said, nirvana being a state where you never, ever, ever have a disturbed thought ever. You only have amazing, blissful, you know, incredible, mind-blowing perceptions and mental states forever, perpetually, infinitely, right? What about between here? That's there and we're here. What about in between, right? What happens in between? Three principal paths. That's what happens. And as you advance through the three principal paths, which are, dare I ask, what the three principal paths might be?
Bodhicitta, renunciation.
Is everybody in agreement?
Yes.
All right, we got consensus. So,
Bodhicitta.
Renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom.
So if you talk about bodhicitta, right? You're talking about evolving from a gross negative being to a highly refined virtuous being, holy being, right? Bodhisattva activity is very important along the way. And so we talk about attaining certain states. There are benchmarks along the way, right? Which can be divided into the five paths, which are
Accumulation.
so the first is the path of accumulation, where you're accumulating virtue.
Preparation.
Path of preparation, where you're preparing to
See emptiness
or experience ultimate reality.
See.
Third path of seeing, where you're experiencing ultimate reality. And the fourth path is path of habituation, where you are changing the very nature of your being and your mind and your karmic seeds in a very accelerated, powerful way because of having experienced ultimate reality directly. And then the fifth path being the path of no more learning, which is becoming enlightened. So, that if you look at that as your spiritual path and your spiritual career, and you say, where along the way can you start to, I don't know, see your karmic seeds and be aware of your karmic seeds and the ripening of your karmic seeds in a direct way, in a conscious, overt, direct way. Excuse me. It's going to be after the path of seeing. It's a function of how clean and pure one's mind is, right? Our minds, human minds, tend to be fairly afflicted and crude and coarse, and the more subtle one's mind becomes, and the cleaner one's being becomes, mind and body and winds and channels, the cleaner they become, the more capacity they have to perceive subtle, refined things, right? Like subtle workings of the mind and karma. So yes, and there are different ways to talk about it. You talk about 10 bodhisattva levels, can be called bodhisattva bhumis, and as you progress through, we can talk about the spiritual path in a lot of different ways with a lot of different benchmarks. And so yes, there are places along the spiritual path where when you reach, this bodhisattva bhumi or that bodhisattva bhumi, then you have this capacity. You can start to emanate bodies, and you reach that bodhisattva bhumi, and you can start to, blah, 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 blah. So the short answer is yes, there is a time. And you're fairly advanced in your spiritual career when you get to that point. So, long answer. It's good. Let's see okay, we're talking about how emptiness is necessary for karma to work, right? Karma wouldn't have any place to project things if everything wasn't empty, right? I mean, if everything wasn't a blank screen, how could you project identity and value and nature onto it, right? If you go to the movie theater and the screen had a 50-foot wide, color mural print painted on it, and it was stuck there, not going anywhere, you wouldn't be able to watch the movie very well, would you? You'd be like, what the hell is this? It's like, right? It's just a mess. So it's the same as true of our reality, right? I mean, if we weren't projecting onto a blank screen, it would be possible to engage in the projection, right? If the screen were fixed, if the stuff that's out there that we're projecting onto had an image affixed already, then that wouldn't work, right? Just as a movie screen wouldn't work in that regard, right? So karma projects onto blank objects, and that's how you get objects. That's how objects are created. That's how objects arise. We project onto a blank screen, and it has that identity and nature and value and experience for us, right? As a multi-sensory experience, right? So you have to have emptiness to have karma. Okay, so it's, you couldn't have karma without emptiness, and you couldn't have emptiness without karma, right? They go together. One is not possible without the other. All right. So they're not only mutually compatible, but emptiness is necessary for karma to function. So you have to take your students through all those steps, right? And that's an answer to that question on the farm. Okay. Then there's a short definition of Mahayana bodhicitta that you should know, and when you start talking about bodhicitta, Mahayana bodhicitta, you're really talking about what is a bodhisattva, right? And when you start talking about what is bodhicitta, what is a bodhisattva, and I think in our culture, in our society, we think like, oh, he gave up his parking space for someone else, he's a bodhisattva, or he's always polite and he holds the door and he's a bodhisattva, or he's always kind and he's always thoughtful, or she's always kind and thoughtful and sweet, she's a real bodhisattva. She never says a harsh word to anyone. She's a real bodhisattva, right? But that's not what a bodhisattva is. That's not what it means to be a bodhisattva. That's being a nice person, which is a good thing, but it's not bodhisattva activity. Okay, so it's not true that every goodness is constituted as bodhisattva activity, right? So what a real bodhisattva is doing is recognizing that this world and this realm is an extremely painful, broken realm, and trying to work to bring every living being out of the suffering realm, right? In an ultimate way, in a deep way, in a spiritual way, right? And so trying to get people from this level of reality, right, to an ultimate level of reality, right? So, and yes, they're kind people too. I mean, obviously you have to be virtuous and you have to be kind, but it's not enough to be virtuous and it's not enough to be kind, right? So, obviously bodhisattvas spend a lot of time being thoughtful towards other people and helping other people, but their primary motivation is to bring everyone to the end of every suffering forever. It's not just, I hope they're not hungry today, or I'll, help them feel a little better by being polite to them. That's not enough. From a Buddhist perspective, yeah, we want to do all those things, obviously. But really, we're talking about higher things. We're talking about ultimate things. We're talking about much deeper, much more powerful, and much more profound things, right? How can we get people to never suffer again? How can we get people to never be hungry again? How can we get people to never be sick again? How can we get people to never have another worried thought in their head again, right? And all of those things wrapped up and rolled into one, right? That's bodhisattva motivation. That's what it is to be a bodhisattva, right? It's not like, well, you got it. All right, I'm not going to keep going on. So they spend a lot of their time trying to teach people how to move to higher levels of reality and nirvana and enlightenment, right? So, obviously they wouldn't ignore people who need help. But the main task of a bodhisattva is to teach people how to reach enlightenment by the quickest means possible, right?
So
Why?
you're a bodhisattva.
Aspiring. How's that? All right, an aspiring bodhisattva. I'll own that. So I ask you, what is by the quickest means possible? If and why? So first, I guess the first question is why by the quickest means possible? I mean,
Because something could happen to us at any time.
well, yeah. I mean, from a personal perspective, I could be dead tonight, and so I may not have a lot of time to do the things that I intend to do, right? I mean, there's that dimension of it certainly. Go ahead.
The sooner one achieves that state, the sooner one can deliver others out of suffering into their own life.
Yeah, as one increases one's own capacity, then one is more able to help everyone else. But my question was, why does one have the motivation to end everyone's suffering as soon as possible? Why are we trying to get people out of suffering quickly rather than slowly?
Because if every other being is your mother, or like it hurts you. Well, you don't want them to suffer. Right?
Yeah, because you care. Basically, right? I mean, if you really cared, you wouldn't be like, you just like burn for like a couple more days, and I'll put out the fire like after I'm done with my TV show. I mean, right? I mean, it's kind of what we're talking about, right? It's like, well, I know that you're like dying of cancer, but there's a game on, right? And it's kind of what we're talking about, right? It's like, look, there's infinite suffering in the world, right? And I potentially have the capacity to help everyone, right? And so, am I going to get around to it in my own sweet time someday? Or am I going to jump on it and do it quickly, right? And so that's why I say aspiring bodhisattva.
Yeah.
Because that's where we start. We start with the idea of, yeah, I buy into that value system. Yeah, I believe in that, and I'm going to make every effort I possibly can to do as much as I can to help people end their suffering in the most comprehensive, profound way possible, right? So if we're serious about that, it really just comes down to, if we really care, you don't let somebody like hold their hand in the fire longer. You say, take your hand out of the fire. What are you doing? Sooner rather than later. That's all. So that leads to the next question: is why with the fastest, most powerful means possible? So that you can, help everyone sooner. And what are the fastest, most powerful means possible? Tantra, the higher teachings of Buddhism. So, if one is really serious about ending suffering as quickly as possible, one would be aspiring to engage in the most powerful, efficacious practices one can engage in to put an end to suffering as quickly as possible. So it's like that. Okay? Because they love other people, right? I mean, because there's some kind of real heartfelt feeling that by my struggling with my personal practice, by my struggling against my impulses, like my impulse is to be lazy, to not make efforts, to think only about myself, to gratify myself as much as possible, whenever possible. No, whatever. By struggling against those impulses, and by thinking, by training oneself as a bodhisattva to think, what about everybody else? What can I do for everybody else? How can I help everybody else? So by struggling in one's own life and in one's own practice to be a bodhisattva and to learn tantra and engage in tantric practices, then one is doing it, right? One is really working as hard as they can to end all suffering as quickly as possible, right? And that's the best way to help other people, and that's bodhisattva activity. Yeah.
Can one utilize, would one utilize Tantra to achieve bodhicitta? Or should it kind of preempt the study of Tantra?
Yeah, so when you say to achieve bodhicitta, so the realization of bodhicitta is a specific attainment, which, as Holy Geshe Michael's described it, is this feeling of like your heart opening and sort of a crystal light, being of crystal light, or connection of crystal light to every living being, where you can actually see the face of every living being and experience every living being and have this like unconditional love and connection with all of them. So that's a very specific thing, or realization, or result of practice to attain bodhicitta, right? But at a practical level, one is an aspiring bodhisattva and an engaging bodhisattva. One is establishing the motivation to care about other people and to love other people unconditionally everywhere. And it doesn't just say like, oh, I'm going to love everybody unconditionally, and next week I'll just have crystal light pouring out of my chest. You know, it doesn't work that way, right? You got to collect causes, and you have to, you know, work it and move towards it. So that practice, you know, is really what we're talking about, right? is to go from where we are, whatever state where each of us is personally in individually. You know, I'm here, you're there, we're all over the place. Is to go from wherever we are personally to evolve it, you know, to unconditional love for every living being, not just human beings, but beings of all realms, right? All sentient beings of all realms, right? And retreat is very good for that. It's very profound in that regard in terms of really developing bodhicitta for beings of all because one has time to get into that and kind of get in touch with that and practice with that in meditation, you know. So I forgot what you asked. I'm just like off on a tangent here. Did I answer your question?
It's pretty straightforward. Like, can Tantra be, because I don't know a lot about it, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
shrouded in mystery and, you know. But, like, could one utilize Tantra to because it's this way to kind of expedite your practice. Could you use it as a tool to achieve bodhicitta?
Ah, that was your question. Thank you.
Yeah.
You bring me back on topic. So everything is caused, right? You have to collect the causes to get the results. Tantra is the most powerful application of sutra principles. So one has to learn the sutra principles that we're learning and have learned, and then one engages in further teaching and training to apply those foundational principles in a more powerful way. So we're talking about, you know, collecting karma, for example, right? From a tantric perspective, you know, you apply the laws of karma to collect the most powerful karmas you can that will ripen, the most powerful virtuous karmas you can, which will ripen as quickly and substantially as possible, right? So, you know, it's a double-edged sword though, because when you're applying powerful methods, you're collecting, you can and usually do collect both virtuous and non-virtuous karmas, which then, you know, are more powerful and ripen more substantially. So one has to be very careful and very well trained and very skillful and, you know, disciplined, frankly, to engage in powerful practices without causing problems for oneself. And so this is why, as we were saying before, you know, the Lam Rim and Sutra is an essential basis for tantric practice and advanced practice, because you're supercharging the laws of karma. They are the laws of karma, and you're applying the laws of karma in a supercharged fashion, right? For better or for worse, right? So, still don't think I got your question, which is the bodhicitta aspect of it. So yeah, all of the sutra stuff carries over and continues in tantra. So yes, unconditional love, right? Much more substantially, much more big time, right? Much more powerful. So, whenever possible, one wants to apply the most powerful means they can. And so there are countless practices which are taught in Buddhism, Sutra and Tantra, right? And broadly speaking, you want to always be moving to a more powerful practice, a more effective practice which will bring results sooner rather than later in a more substantial fashion, you know? So, you know, you can generate bodhicitta through Sutra means, you can generate bodhicitta through Tantra means. Both are valid. You know, one is faster and more powerful than the other. But you can't do the advance without the beginning. Like anything, you know? Like try to dive off a high dive, you know, 100-meter diving board, you know, without ever having like trained in basic diving, you know, good luck.
Wasn't there a really famous teacher who purposely didn't learn Tantra to get enlightened, to prove to the majority of beings who only know Sutra that it's possible? Isn't that?
That would be Shakyamuni Buddha. 3 countless eons.
No, but wasn't it someone after him who...
I mean, if he was famous, I mean, if you've heard of him, that means he was famous.
I thought it was one of the big guys.
I mean,
I think it's a story of Tsongkhapa not choosing a certain practice.
That might be it. Tsongkhapa.
you know, perhaps, but if you just apply logic, which, you know, we're going to get to, would you choose to take, 10,000 years to help a person who's being tormented, or would you like to do it quickly, if you could? And which would you choose?
you know. So, yeah.
One thing about that, usually before you like traditionally today, it's a bit different because the generation is a bit more degenerate. But before that, you had to already have bodhicitta in order before you got into the tantra, because you use energy and it can give you powers and stuff like this. So it has a downfall, a pitfall, and so you have to kind of have already established in morality and bodhicitta to even enter as a requisite for tantra.
Well, ethics are central to all of Buddhism, you know. I mean, ethics are a core of all of Buddhism. So, but not just ethics, but three principal paths. You know, renunciation, bodhicitta, karti, right? All of it. So, okay. So, where are we? What are we talking about? We're talking about the definition of nirvana would be the next another question on the final. It's important to know the definition of nirvana for two reasons. One is to dispel dharma rumors that nirvana is some kind of like buzzed out heroin state, right? It's like I can just like be blissed out, like whatever, right? Like or something like you go into like you disappear or like into some kind of like blissful nothingness or something like that, right? So, and we talked about it. You know, if you, David, got rid of all your negative thoughts and never had a disturbed mind tonight, you know, would you look any different to anyone physically? I mean, you might smile more, right? Probably would be smiling more and have little wrinkles around your eyes or something, you know. But same body, right? Same everything. And so, you know, no one's going to necessarily know by looking at your outer form, you know, that you've attained nirvana, right? So,
So it's possible to obtain nirvana in this lifetime in this form?
Sure. Because, you know, if you remember when we talked about nirvana, there's nirvana with remainder and nirvana without remainder. Because if you're going to achieve nirvana and enlightenment in this lifetime, right? And we had the karma to be born with this body. So we have a major throwing karma, which resulted in this body, which has a lifespan of however many years, right? So if my lifespan is 60 years, and I'm 58 and I get to nirvana, I still got this body for 2 more years before it kicks, right? But I have a different mind, right? My mind is completely free of any affliction, completely.
So it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's in fact the goal is to attain nirvana with this body in this life before you die, right? Or full enlightenment. And so if you achieve that, then you have what's called nirvana with remainder, where the remainder being like, you know, the body which is just lingering about waiting to finish off so that karma is completed and then you don't have that limiting body anymore, right? So and then the second thing to know about nirvana is that you can only achieve it if you've seen emptiness directly, right? You can only attain nirvana if you experience ultimate reality. There is no other path, there is no other realization which is powerful enough to put a permanent end to all mental afflictions. Right? So it's impossible to remove our anger, our jealousy, or you know, desire, or whatever it is, even to reduce them very much, frankly, you know, without experiencing ultimate reality or seeing emptiness. You know, we work on it and we make incremental progress. And it's good, you know, even small reductions in our negative mind are meaningful, you know. But to really eliminate it permanently, we have to see emptiness, right? So as Dharma teachers, we have a big responsibility, you know. I mean, if a physical doctor makes a mistake, you know, and has an accident during surgery or something like that, you know, it could kill someone in this life or you know, hurt someone in this life. As a spiritual teacher, one has a responsibility for a person over multiple lifetimes, right? And so teaching wrong ideas about nirvana or emptiness or reality, you know, is very substantial, and you know, it gives a person a chance of dying over and over and over again, right? I mean, having countless lives of suffering and dying, right? Because they didn't receive the information they need to put an end to their suffering forever. Right? Because we didn't teach it to them. So we have a real responsibility to not fool around with the Dharma teachings or edit them or, you know, make them some cool hip thing which leaves out part of the material. So very important. So number 12, Master Dharmakirti in his 8th century root text on Buddhist logic says that 2 elements have to be present for Tantra to work. Name them. Alright, so, I mean, this applies to mantras as well as tantric practices as well. So, again, so tantric practice is a more advanced practice, and not to be too mysterious, and not to reveal secrets or anything, but shroud. Shroud, there's a shroud here, okay? We're shrouded in it. It's essentially, tantric initiation is permission to practice particular meditation, okay? And it also is the collection of specific karmic seeds, which will ripen into specific karmic results. So engaging in tantric initiation and tantric practice is the collection of very specific, powerful karmic seeds, and resolving or dedicating or asserting oneself in a concerted fashion to engage in specific meditation practices and ways of thinking and being to collect powerful karma. So that, I mean, it's not really a big mysterious thing, right? It's fairly straightforward in that regard, So for these teachings to work, for these advanced tantric teachings to work, 2 things have to be present, right? And mantras, people say mantras, I'm like hitting home, it's very obvious. There are lots of different mantras, and so there are mantras associated with tantric practice. But 2 things have to be present for these things to work. One is that they have to have been spoken by a very pure, high, holy, spiritual being, right? I mean, think about it, right? Somebody's going to say, here's the supercharged practice I'm going to give you, where your karmas are going to ripen really fast and strong. They don't know what they're talking about, or it's not going to work, right? So, as you were saying before, at what point is one able to see karma and how karma works and all the rest? It has to be quite advanced. So for tantra to work, you have to have a very advanced holy being who's describing how to practice, right? And giving detailed instructions on how to practice. What's the practice? The practice is collecting powerful karma which will ripen big and fast. So obviously if somebody doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, maybe the wrong karma to collect big and fast, and you screw yourself up big time, right? Or just nothing would happen, right? Okay, so that's one thing. And then what's the second thing that has to work there? The first is the person who's teaching it, or the person who conceived it and created it initially and is giving it has to have extraordinary spiritual power. And then the person who's practicing it has to be very pure. They have to be very, very pure. The person who's reciting the mantra or doing the practice has to be very pure in themselves and their ethics, right? So, I mean, there are all these tantric books. You go to the bookstore and you buy a tantric book. You can read it, right? But nothing's going to happen. I mean, nothing's going to come of it because it doesn't meet those 2 criteria, right? It's not the book is not some like secret thing containing some magical words where if you read the right magical words, all of a sudden something happens. It's not like that, right? It's about karma and emptiness. It's about what we've been talking about, right? So it just wouldn't work. So the person who practices have to be pure. Mantras don't have much effectiveness if you're not pure, right? I mean, the Shakyamuni Buddha and the lineage spent a lot of time disproving the idea that Om has power in and of itself, right? That the word Om, or the mantra Om, is self-existently powerful, right? And this is a very big idea in India and Hindu schools. Like you recite Om, and Om is the magic word. And because you're saying the magic word, magic things happen, right? So, all right. So, there's no self-existent power in any word. If there was just a magic word and someone said it and something popped up, we know about it, right? Okay.
So on that basis, then why does it make a difference that highly pure being has to have conceived of it? Because then that highly, the mantra or the tantra that the highly conceived being created is not obviously not going to be the same for everybody.
It's not self-existent.
Exactly. So why does it matter that?
Well, why do you need both sides of that equation, right? So let's say you had a spiritual...
I understand the other side.
Yeah, so let's say you
like
had a,
me being having to be pure.
right. So let's say you had a spiritually realized being who conceives of practice and says, do this practice and you collect the karma and you get these karmic outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I ask you, what would happen if you weren't pure or I weren't pure?
Then, again, nothing would.
But think about it, take it to another level. Think about it another level. If I weren't pure, would it be possible for me to have the perception, the concept, the reality, the valid perception of a pure being in my world giving me a pure practice that brings a pure result?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. That's why. So there's no self-existent stuff from the originator of the tantra or the mantra, right? And so it doesn't matter if some schmo comes along, and says like, oh, I got a mantra, I'm going to say the magic words and I'll be like holy, right? It doesn't work that way, right? So then I ask you, why do you need somebody on the other side of the equation, right? Why do you need, if I'm pure and virtuous, why do I need somebody over there who's, showing up in my world to say, here's a pure holy practice you can do and do these things and you get these great karmic outcomes, and why do I need that? Because that's what spiritual practice is. How do you think you evolve, spiritually evolve? If you're virtuous and pure, you have pure beings in your world. And these pure beings who are in your world say, let me help you out. How do we think this works?
So yeah,
right?
so I guess my thing is that I see that statement as more of a personal, like the example that you just, for example, brought up. It's specific to a personal connection with another being versus the way I guess the way I heard the statement was, it has to be.
So I ask you, is there a being out there from its own side? It's always personal. Everything's personal. So if Lama ABC comes along and says, I'm the holy tantric Lama, I will give you an initiation and you will learn profound things and you will have great realizations, and then you and your partner do that, and you get some great experience of that person and they have some lousy experience of that person. Is it the Lama? No. You could both be engaging in the same practice with dramatically different results. There's no self-existent anything. And so this is very profound, because what it says is any goodness we experience, any holiness we experience, any Lama we experience, any virtue we experience, any positive ripening, any teaching, any mantra, any sutra, any tantra, comes from where? Me. It is personal. It's always personal. So when one thinks about the Lama, the teacher, and the teachings, what is one really relating to?
Yourself.
And more specifically, your goodness and your virtue, which has become manifest as your reality and your world and your experience.
So but that statement, it has to have been spoken. For me, doesn't.
So
it's not that it has to have. It's that it's going to be for you. Period.
Well, depends on your perception, doesn't it? Because think about the Dalai Lama, just to make it simple. The some Chinese hate him, some love him.
Exactly.
Anybody could speak a tantra and be great for one and terrible for another. So
it's not that it has to have.
It's not self-existently.
Yeah.
To the perception of the practitioner. It's always that way, right? It's never self-existently out there, ever, in any case, in any regard, relative to anything. Right? That's what we're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So extremely important, crucial point, and please don't forget it. Whenever you relate to any spiritual teacher, any spiritual being, any virtuous being, it is the manifestation of your goodness.
Yeah.
So, how should you behave? You see? How should you think about it? How should you act? Should you support it? Should you encourage it? Should you further it? Or should you just go like, yeah, no big deal? Right? There's a movie on tonight. Screw that. Right? All right. Three different types of meditation. Anyway, so just to put a period at the end of that, you know, the Buddhists went to a lot of trouble to prove that there's no self-existent mantra or anything else out there. Right? Okay. So, three different types of meditation. So there's this idea that the only kind of meditation you can do is some kind of fixed meditation, you know, where you meditate on a candle or on your breath or some fixed thing, right? And usually it has no virtuous content, you know, it's neutral, like breathing meditation, right? And so important if you're teaching that, you know, you're clear that these kinds of neutral objects are not the point. Master Vasubandhu taught them in the Abhidharma Kosha, you know, and it was a practice that he detailed there as a preliminary to meditation. When we're doing breathing meditation or fixing our mind, it's to shift gears and get into a neutral place. It's not meant to be the meditation, right? It's meant to be the preliminary to the meditation. So there's this misconception that, you know, just think about a blank screen, watch thoughts drift through your mind, let them come and go, watch your breath. You know, that's what meditation means, right? Not owning your thoughts. You know, I mean, Holy Ken Rinpoche used to say, yeah, rabbits watch their thoughts all day long. You know, not a big deal, is it? You know, you want to be a rabbit? Watch your thoughts. You know, who cares? Right? Not going to help you. Because why? I mean, if you're watching your thoughts and you think, oh, they're such an asshole, you know, I really hate that person. Oh, I'm just watching my thoughts, you know. You're collecting karma. You're collecting mental karma continuously, right? Not helping yourself. You know, quite the contrary. You know, you're allowing negative thoughts to go on, simply collecting more negative karma, mental karma, right? So, not the point. No big thing, right? So, you know, it's not enough to just say I don't identify with my thoughts. The point is to train the mind and condition the mind to virtue. Yeah.
On that respect, there is a big difference in the, you know, the Theravada and Mahayana.
Sure. Yeah.
Mahasatipatthana Sutta, you know, the sutra does talk about mindfulness, thinking, and this.
So you have to be clear about what hat you're wearing, right?
Yes. Exactly.
So which hat are we wearing? We are wearing the Mahayana hat and the Prasangika hat, and right?
Because actually, just for that aspect, when you actually watch your thoughts in the right way, thought, body, everything, you see the quality that they have. When concentration is high, then you see that they are non-self, that they are suffering, they are impermanent, or this, and then you get insight and you...
But then you're going beyond watching your thoughts, you see. You're going perhaps into analytical meditation, right? Or some other lines of reasoning, perhaps.
Going to direct experience of that, which is a little different. Which is the same, which actually the same in direct experience in the Mahayana tradition, but without compassion. It's the same.
No, I mean there are many different types of meditation taught by different schools. You know, I mean Theravada and Mahayana and all different schools of Buddhism. The point being that our root practice is working with our mind and training and conditioning our mind to virtue, right? Many techniques and many methods to do that, and the point here is simply that just shifting to neutral isn't what it's about. You know, just kind of zoning out and letting the mind just go in circles or do whatever it wants, or, you know, watch thoughts of dinner go by. You know, it's not really the point of meditation practice. And yeah, if one is trained, and if one has, maybe say it a different way, if the mind is already steeped in virtue, then it would make sense that virtue would be naturally floating through the mind and arising, and that's good, because then you have virtuous content in your mind. And that's really what we're talking about, right, is what is the content in your mind. So, frame it in that regard. You know? Okay. Okay. So, Lama practice. There's sort of a basic question about Lama practice, right? I mean, if I or any other teacher got up here and said that, you know, this is how you should treat me, it's kind of self-serving, right? Like, you know, make offerings to me, you know, treat me like I'm special, you know, I'm the most important thing in the world for you. It doesn't really fly. It doesn't really come across very well. You know, so it's important to get a clear Lama teaching somewhere, and frankly, what it boils down to is that if we really understood the nature of a teacher, as we were speaking about before, one would be putting all of one's time and effort and energy into furthering that engagement, if you will. So it seems self-interested to say it if you experience them as out there from their own side, right? But engaging with a teacher, a spiritual teacher, a holy spiritual teacher, really is the source of all one's happiness. Really is the source of all one's goodness. It's the first line of the Lam Rim, right? So it's not the opening line of the Lam Rim for no reason, right? You have to see that serving a holy teacher is the source of all spiritual attainments and all happiness, you know, as we talked about. Not because they're self-existently holy, right? No such thing. Okay. And it's unfortunate. All sorts of spiritual abuses occur because people get into the mode of they're self-existently holy, and I should do whatever they tell me to do because they know and I don't, right? And therefore I have to not think and not use reasoning and not.
Jeffrey Dahmer type of stuff.
Well, I won't go that far.
Well, that's what was going on with that. He was saying like, I'm God.
Somebody believed it. Hey. So, from our side, it's important to acknowledge virtue and goodness, right? But even to do that, you have to apply reasoning, you have to apply analysis, you have to engage your mind and say, is this appropriate, is this not appropriate, is this virtue, is this not virtue, right? Okay? So, all right. So because of the way people view spiritual teachers as self-existent, a lot of problems have arisen in the West and in the East equally, And so I think in our culture, in our society, as a spiritual teacher, one has to be the one who's engaged in service. As a spiritual teacher, we have to be the one who's cleaning up and setting up and paying for things and treating people nicely when they're treating you badly and disrespecting you and all these other things. I think that's the nature of being a spiritual teacher in this culture and in this society. And so that's just the way it is as a teacher. And I think from the student's perspective, especially in the beginning, it's just show up in class and then take off. But I think as one is trained, is more and more well trained, then one's attitude changes and one's behavior changes, right? So we have to be very careful about how we teach the Lama stuff in America and the West. So there's this honeymoon effect. Someone meets a new spiritual teacher. I remember when I started teaching, I'd be like, oh, I want to be a student, and what can I bring you? I'm going to France. Let me bring you back things from France. And you want to go to France, But it's actually very beautiful, and it's very nice. It's very sweet. It's very wonderful. But the honeymoon effect wears off like any honeymoon. Ask anyone who's married, right? And it's easy then for the perception to shift, and for people who were so keen and revved up, and might have given a lot of money or possessions, or you said, "Oh, you're wonderful," and now you're not wonderful. So it's easy for the regret to follow, right? And so as a teacher, it's very important to make sure that the person is mature, is spiritually mature, and balanced, and objective. Say, what, if you want to make some kind of major commitment, come back in 6 months and see if you still feel the same way. Make sure that you're not in some sort of starry-eyed, honeymoon phase, right? So important to be aware of as you're going into your teaching career, finishing these full 18 courses of training here. Okay, so next question, death meditation. Death meditation is important. 3 basic steps of death meditation, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the death meditation which goes on in the West is, it's like, well, you can ignore your practice your entire life, and then you can learn special practices. So that in the last 2 minutes, at the moment of death, you can send your mind to the special realm where you'll get enlightened, and that's death meditation. And it's really a disservice to people, unfortunately. It's some kind of teachings about highly esoteric, unusual secret practices that highly trained people can use at the moment of death, to get enlightened or something, right? Very unlikely. I mean, people who train themselves, every day for a long time, for years, could perhaps practice those things. But, if you're not doing that, then
It's hard to practice it.
Yeah, it's hard to practice every day.
It's complicated.
It's hard to practice anything every day.
Yeah,
right?
I keep saying it's a gross transgression if you don't recite. So it's like I'm trying to recite the thing in the daytime and the nighttime, and sometimes I'm just too tired or don't have time to recite it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to practice consistently.
Yeah. I feel bad about that.
Yeah. It's good to affirm yourself for what you are doing.
Okay.
So it's a disservice to people who aren't well trained or who aren't meditating seriously to somehow teach them these things where they think like they can just do a little zigzag at the time of death and everything will be okay. It doesn't work. It's not that way. So the goal of the death meditation is really so that at some point in your daily life you start to live as if this is your last day of being alive. If I'm going to die today, how do I want to spend my last day? This is my last day here. What do I want to do? So the goal of death meditation is really to bring into sharp focus how we're living our life. Am I living my life well? Am I spending my life energy in the moments of my life well? And am I doing the right thing? Am I living in a meaningful way? So the point of death meditation is that to really look at every action we undertake and to evaluate it in the light of the fact that we're going to die tonight. So at any given moment, we're not doing anything that we don't really ultimately want to be doing. And does that mean you run out and quit your job? Because who wants to go to work, right? I'd rather be meditating than going to work, right? I'd rather be doing some, spiritual practice than, something I have to do to pay the rent or whatever it might be, right? So you have to evaluate all your activities in that context, How many hours of our day and how much of our life energy are we spending on these things, and is it worth it? Because that's what death meditation is all about. Would I make different choices? Would I have different priorities if I knew for a fact that I had, almost no time left to live? Because one night will be your last night. And I mean, I remember, death is in some respects a mundane thing. One day get up and I was shaving and I walked across the street. Sorry. I was shaving and I walked across the hall. I got in the elevator, a 30-story building or whatever. Got in the elevator, to go downstairs to go to work, and lo and behold, the elevator car stopped and was stuck between floors, and then all of a sudden it's filling with smoke, right? And so, all right, well, here I am in an elevator, with doors that are locked and won't open. It's filling with smoke, and obviously there's nowhere to go, right? It's not like you can escape. It's in a little steel box, that's 6 feet by 10 feet or something, right? It's well, I guess I'll just sit here and suffocate then. And that's how death works, right? I mean, it's from beginning some mundane thing and ending some mundane thing, you die. From the time you start to pick up your spoon of cereal in the morning to the time you put it in your mouth and chew on it, in between those two mundane activities, you die. From the time when you go to sleep and from the time you wake up, you die. It's just how it works. It's between one mundane thing and another mundane thing. We die. We don't think of it in those terms. We think of it as some big monumentous thing like death is over there. It's not. Death is just another little thing in between two ordinary things. That's it. So it could come, walking down the steps or walking across the street. It could be any number of simple little things, which are the last thing we do. So that's the idea of a good death meditation. It's not about what color lights am I going to see in the bardo, or am I going to swirl around to the left as I'm going through the next realm or something. It's what do I want to be doing right now while I have time and while I can do something, right? So it's so that in our life we can honestly say we're doing the most important thing in every moment. So that's the test of good death meditation. Okay, 19. We have to take a break. Let's take a break. On that positive note, let's take a break. Have some cookies and perk up.